What if a mere man could wound a god? Not trick him, not outrun him, actually drive a spear through his flesh and make him scream. That story is real, at least in the world of ancient Greek myth, and it happened during the darkest years of the Trojan War, when Greeks and Trojans had been locked in bloody stalemate outside Troy's walls for nearly a decade. Our protagonist was Diomedes, king of Argos, young, proud, and one of the fiercest fighters the Greek army had brought to Troy. He wanted what every hero at Troy wanted: glory that would outlive him, a name sung for generations. But Diomedes wanted it more fiercely than most, and he was willing to take risks that would make older, wiser warriors flinch. Beside him, in his chariot, rode Sthenelus, his loyal companion and charioteer, a steady young soldier who had fought at his side since the war began and trusted Diomedes with his life. But Diomedes had an even more powerful ally watching over him: Athena, the gray-eyed goddess of wisdom and war, who favored clever, courageous mortals above almost anyone else on the battlefield. Before that day's fighting began, Athena came to Diomedes and gave him an extraordinary gift: the power to see the gods themselves moving unseen among the armies, disguising themselves as they helped their favored sides. She gave him one crucial warning, though. He could fight any god he encountered on the field, except one. Aphrodite, the gentle goddess of love, he was allowed to wound if she interfered. Every other god, Athena said, he must not touch. With that blessing, Diomedes rode back into the war a changed man, stronger, faster, and burning with a battle fury that made the Trojans scatter before him like leaves in a storm. Among the Trojans watching this one-man rampage was Pandarus, a skilled archer who decided the only way to stop Diomedes was to strike him down from a distance before he could reach the walls of Troy. Pandarus loosed his arrow, and it struck true, piercing Diomedes' shoulder. Blood ran down his armor, and for a moment, the Greek hero staggered. But instead of retreating, he simply grew angrier. Diomedes called out to Athena, praying for the strength to answer this wound with vengeance. And she answered, healing the injury instantly and filling his limbs with even greater power than before. Healed and enraged, Diomedes hunted down Pandarus in the chaos of the fighting and killed him, ending the archer's ambush for good, and warning every Trojan nearby that this Greek could not be brought down so easily. Next, Diomedes turned on Aeneas, another celebrated Trojan prince, and wounded him badly in the fighting that followed, throwing a heavy stone that shattered the hip of his enemy and left him crumpled on the ground. Aeneas was no ordinary prince. He was the son of Aphrodite herself, and seeing her child in danger, the goddess of love descended from Olympus to carry him to safety. But because of Athena's earlier permission, Diomedes did not hesitate. He rushed forward and struck Aphrodite herself, wounding her hand as she tried to shield her son, something no mortal had dared do before. Aphrodite shrieked and fled the battlefield entirely, abandoning her wounded son and returning weeping to Olympus. Word of what had just happened spread instantly among the gods. A mortal had drawn divine blood. Fortunately for Aeneas, Apollo, the golden god of light, swept in and carried the wounded prince away in a cloud of protective mist, saving his life and warning the Greeks that this mortal was pushing his luck dangerously far. With Aphrodite humiliated and the Trojans reeling, it seemed the battle was swinging entirely in the Greeks' favor. But the gods were far from finished meddling in this war, and one of them was about to change everything. Watching from the walls of Troy was Ares himself, the brutal god of war, a being who thrived on slaughter and had a long-standing preference for the Trojan side in this conflict. Furious at seeing the Trojans humiliated and his favorite Aeneas nearly killed, Ares decided he would no longer watch from a distance. He strode down onto the battlefield himself, fighting openly beside the Trojan prince Hector. This was a huge problem. Ares was not merely another warrior, he was war itself given form, and wherever he fought, panic, bloodlust, and slaughter followed in waves that no ordinary soldier could withstand. With Ares fighting at their side, the Trojans surged forward with terrifying new strength. Greek lines that had been advancing all day suddenly buckled, and soldiers who had never known fear began to flee in terror. Athena watched all of this unfold from Olympus, and she was furious. The gods had an old understanding to let mortals fight their own war without directly overpowering it. And Ares, fighting openly on the ground, broke that balance completely. She realized that this time, quietly healing and empowering Diomedes from a distance would not be enough. If the Greeks were going to survive this day, someone needed to confront Ares directly. So Athena made an extraordinary decision. She would go down to the battlefield herself, find Diomedes, and personally guide him into a fight against the god of war. She found Diomedes nursing his old arrow wound at the edge of the retreat, frustrated and ashamed at having to fall back. Athena climbed into his chariot beside him, taking Sthenelus' place at the reins. "Drive straight at Ares," she told him. "Do not fear him, and do not hold back your spear. I will guide your hand myself." Diomedes hesitated only a heartbeat. This was, after all, an actual god she was asking him to fight. But he trusted Athena completely. She had never failed him before, and if the goddess of wisdom herself believed this fight was winnable, Diomedes was willing to stake his life on it. To make sure Ares never saw the attack coming, Athena wrapped herself in the mist of invisibility, hiding herself from the god of war's sight, while remaining fully present at Diomedes' side, guiding the chariot toward him. Ares was in the thick of the slaughter, stripping armor from a fallen soldier, utterly unaware that a mortal chariot was thundering toward him, with a goddess riding hidden inside it. The god never saw it coming. The instant Ares spotted the chariot, he hurled his massive spear at Diomedes with all his godly strength. But Athena, still hidden, reached out and seized the spear in midair, deflecting it harmlessly aside. Now it was Diomedes' turn to strike. With Athena's hand guiding his own, he drove his bronze-tipped spear forward with every ounce of strength he had, aiming straight for the god's stomach. The spear plunged deep into Ares' body. For one impossible moment, the god of war, the very embodiment of violence, felt what mortals feel every day on this battlefield. Real, agonizing pain. Ares let out a scream so enormous that, according to the old stories, it sounded like 10,000 men shouting at once, a sound so terrible that soldiers on both sides froze in place, dropping their weapons in raw terror. Wounded and humiliated, Ares abandoned the battlefield entirely, transforming into a dark storm cloud and rushing up toward Olympus to complain to his father Zeus about the mortal who had dared to hurt him. Ares stood before Zeus, pointing an accusing finger down toward the battlefield and demanding punishment for Diomedes, insisting that Athena had broken every rule by helping a mortal harm a god. But Zeus had little sympathy. He reminded Ares that he loved war and suffering more than any god on Olympus, and that this pain was simply a taste of the chaos he himself unleashed on the world every single day. Zeus refused to help him. Even so, Zeus ordered Paeon, the healer of the gods, to tend to Ares' wound And slowly, painfully, the god of war was mended, humbled, but very much alive. Back on the battlefield, everything had changed. With Ares gone, the terrifying fury that had swept through the Trojan ranks vanished as quickly as it had come, and the soldiers who had felt invincible moments before began to falter. Seizing the moment, the Greeks rallied and pushed forward once more, and Diomedes, the man who only hours earlier had been driven back by an arrow, now led the charge that turned the entire tide of that day's fighting. Athena remained at his side through it all, quietly guiding his chariot until the fighting eased for the day, never once seeking credit for what she had done, content that her chosen hero had proven himself worthy of her trust. That night, word of what had happened spread through both camps like wildfire. A mortal man had faced the god of war in single combat and walked away the victor, while Ares himself had fled bleeding back to Olympus. Sthenelus, his loyal charioteer, told the tale to anyone who would listen, proud to have witnessed it firsthand, even though he had briefly given up his seat to a goddess in disguise. Diomedes himself did not boast. He simply understood, more clearly than most warriors ever would, that his victory belonged as much to Athena's guidance as to his own courage. And that lesson made him humble, even in triumph. The war itself was far from over. Troy's walls still stood, and years of fighting still lay ahead before the city would finally fall. But this single day had proven something the whole world would remember forever. Even the mightiest of gods could bleed, and even an ordinary man, armed with courage and the favor of the right ally, could stand against forces far greater than himself.